Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. Today's guest is a very cool guy by the name of Chang. Joel is the COO and co-founder of a very cool electric startup in Singapore. The company is called Iron Mobility, and his company is developing technology to become and develop the leader in electric motorcycles. I think this conversation was very interesting to have just because of where he's based, Singapore. I think there is a lot of interest in moving and changing a lot of the dynamics around electric mobility in that region. And I think his company is aimed at basically revolutionizing the electric motorcycle for that entire region alone. So this is a very cool conversation that I had with Joel. We chat about everything that has to do with Iron Mobility, everything to do with the challenges, the opportunities that exist. The conversation also takes inroads into particular access of the markets, having to do with the engineering, the building out of the infrastructure of Iron Mobility, and basically what the roadmap is for the next 5 to 10 years. I think this chat was particularly important, especially now when we start to think about sustainable mobility, we start to think about renewable energy and climate change. I really think that these topics are extremely important to have to talk about. My conversation with Joel was super insightful, and you really get a peek into what it takes to build a electric vehicle startup in Southeast Asia. So with that, I really hope you enjoy the conversation. And remember, if you like these videos, you like these podcasts, please subscribe, comment below, and suggest anyone else that you'd like to have on the show as well. So with that, I really hope you enjoyed, and here we go. Hello, Joel. How are you?
I'm great, Barry.
Thanks for joining the podcast. You are the second guest on the show, and it's really good to have you. I wanted to speak to you today about all the cool things you're doing with Iron Mobility, and I know you're based in Singapore at the moment, and you're doing not just Singapore, but you're all over the shop in Southeast Asia, trying to get this up and going. So. Why don't you go ahead and probably give the listeners a quick 1 minute intro about yourself, and then we can take it from there.
Sure. Thank you, Barry. Thanks for having me, and really excited being here, being your second guest. Really wishing you that this segments of yours, this podcast or video interviews of yours will go on to much bigger things. Right.
Thanks, man.
Okay, so a little bit about myself. So I'm as a kid, I was a petrol freak. Okay, I loved cars. My dream was to be a race car driver. So I loved combustion engines, and I basically got my dream job right when I started working for BMW, and I rose from marketing guy all the way to group CEO in 12 years of a big dealer group in China and in the region over here. Soon after, I realized this is part of when about 5-6 years ago, when the Dieselgate scandal that I think many of your US listeners will remember, the Dieselgate scandal from Volkswagen, where basically the whole world realized that Volkswagen was cheating on the emissions with their defeat devices in their ECUs, basically cheating regulators and consumers that the cars that they were putting out were actually much dirtier and much more polluted than we really actually are, right? Sorry, much less than they actually are. And when I looked around me and I looked at the car industries, the manufacturers that I knew, and I asked them, and basically quietly, a lot of them acknowledged that this is what the industry does, basically for profits, to game the system a little bit. And then I realized I was part of the problem, not of the solution. Now, why I love mobility so much is because from a very young age, I realized that mobility is a key tenet of the human condition. To move. To move means we can live, to get a job, to improve our station in life, to love, all these things, for knowledge, for advancement of society and civilization. But then I asked myself, being what I was doing, why should the cost of our mobility be our health and the health of our planet as a whole? So that's when I decided, when I looked at leaders like Tesla, how they were changing the world. Then I came back to Southeast Asia and I looked at the map in Southeast Asia and I asked myself, what is the biggest impact that I can do from my experience for my region in Asia? And I looked around me, then I realized it's not the car that we need to transition towards cleaner mobility. It's actually the motorcycle, because there's easily 200 to 300 million motorcycles in Southeast Asia alone. There's a billion motorcycles in Asia, right? At least. And they're all dirty. There is no Tesla here. There is no Honda or Yamaha that is going to be a Tesla as well. So I felt that I needed to make an impact on that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because, as you said, you mentioned Tesla, you mentioned all of these companies. I think it's incredibly important, especially in Southeast Asia, because of the demographics, because of the way the city streets are laid out and the way people commute to and from work, right? Most of the time, it's not cars you see, it's motorcycles, right? So it seems perfect that, what you guys are doing with motorcycles is quite significant, especially when it comes to EV motorcycles specifically. So, I really want to sort of dig deeper here and figure out exactly what iron mobility is all about. You mentioned you started with them since 2019, right?
Yes.
And before that, you were in Scorpio Electric, right? So can you tell me a little bit about what Scorpio Electric? I know that from reading the stuff about you was also an EV motorcycle company as well. Was that more or less a transition from Scorpio into iron mobility, or it's a completely separate thing?
Yeah. So when I came back and thought about doing this 3 years ago, I hooked up with a public company in Singapore that had the same vision as I did and was willing to incubate and accelerate the concept. So, to be honest, that was really our learning process, and my as well. I learned a lot in Scorpio Electric because at that time, just like I think Tesla 15 years ago, there is no electric vehicle two-wheeler industry. There is no supply chain. There is no even consultants. There's nobody to ask. We had to figure out everything ourselves. And so that was the education in Scorpio. However, it soon became clear that Scorpio Electric was going to go on a different path. Being part of a public company and being involved with very high-end exclusive manufacturers like Lamborghini and Alfa Romeo, very Italian. So they were going to go on a much more exclusive, high-end range of vehicle. Sorry, my background is getting a bit loud.
No, it's perfectly fine. I can hear it perfectly loud and
All
clear.
right. So therein, then I decided that for scale to really bring about meaningful transition to electric two-wheeler mobility in Southeast Asia, we had to focus something more affordable, right? Something the everyday man could use, not a Lamborghini electric bike, not an Alfa Romeo electric bike, not even a BMW electric bike. We had to go down all the way, like I said, in the car world, maybe like a Toyota, Hyundai electric motorcycle. And that's where Honda, Yamaha are. So that's when I started Ion Mobility with my partner, James, who's a tech VC guy. He has tech robotics background. So we decided that, hey, let's do this, right? Let's bring affordable, but yet still desirable. This is important, right? If it's affordable and it's cheap, and like what many countries can bring out, but it's not enticing, it's not motivating, it's not desirable. So we had to be affordable and yet desirable. So that's when Ion Mobility was born 1 year ago.
you know, Over a year ago, you started Iron Mobility, and things have dramatically changed over the past year, especially with COVID. And, so many things have sort of evolved. What was starting Iron Mobility like during these times? I know there's a lot of startups starting right now who are trying to get into spaces like remote working, remote delivery of food, especially, using motorcycles. What's the experience like so far starting Iron Mobility in the time of COVID?
Okay, I think it's twofold, right? the issues with remote work are just exacerbated, right, because of COVID. But yet it has actually helped us because it's forced us, startups like us. So we have footprints in India, China, Indonesia, and Singapore. Right? We have teams, like literal teams, not just vendors or partners. We have teams running on the ground. And previously, you would have to travel, but then you would spend a lot of traveling time, a lot of inefficiencies in travel. But with COVID, it meant you couldn't travel. So then everybody had to figure out ways, of managing each other well, of integrating teams, of working better together. So I think in that sense, COVID has perhaps helped us accelerate that process that would have to be anyway. Like the MNCs do this very well. Global companies, they understand New York, how it works with Tokyo, right? How Singapore works with China, that sort of thing. But startups, it's really difficult to figure out in the beginning. So I think that's one good thing that's come out of COVID. But the really challenging part about COVID is definitely in the early stages was the funding, right? And this is something that may resonate with a lot of the startup viewers as well. It's funding, right? Because funding literally dried up basically in the early stages of COVID because everybody was wait and see. Even the VCs couldn't travel, right? Everybody was pretty much stuck. Everybody's trying to figure out what's next. Do we talk to VCs? We hear of like even VCs pulling term sheets in the early days of COVID, the first few months of this year. They just pull it because everybody was insecure and didn't know what's going to happen, right? And then it moved on to the stage where a lot of VCs asked themselves and told us like, hey, we need to focus on our portfolio, on saving our portfolio first before looking at new investments, because this management of our portfolio is critical now. But then it quickly moved to a narrative where, hey, this is the best, from the VCs as well, this is the best time to see which one of our portfolio, if they can survive COVID, they are sure winners. They are real winners that can push through if you can push through COVID. So, but we managed to do pretty well in terms of fundraising towards the end. And I think mainly because of the fact that we were really focused on executing on a really good concept that is, whether with COVID or no COVID, it didn't make a difference. Like I said, mobility, affordable and good mobility that doesn't harm our environment and yet improves the quality of the experience. I think it is timeless, right? So that is basically the fundamental takeaway that we can have. And eventually, once the VC world settled down, they then got to see startups like us and the true value that we can bring in the future.
Yeah, I think definitely the EV space has definitely taken off like a rocket over the past year. You see like the stock market, and you'll see how much Tesla has exponentially grown. Even during times of COVID, it's just completely outperformed itself in terms of stock market and revenue and profit and what have you. And so I really want to understand why iron mobility exists today. I know that, I've traveled through Southeast Asia myself. I've been through Vietnam, been through Singapore and Taiwan and Thailand. Everyone's riding motorcycles, right? But why has it taken until like you guys and maybe just a few small other companies to really start to think about this now, right? Why is there a challenge? What do you see in the next 5 to 10 years that's really going to really make you stand out? Because we could have done this 15 years ago as well, but has there been challenges that you're facing that only can sort of, the technology exists only today that didn't exist before?
Okay, maybe to answer your question, Barry, I'll ask you a question. Like, you're based in the US,
Yeah.
and US is really strong in antitrust, right? But can you name me a few companies or industry where huge monopolies remain? Huge. Like when I'm talking huge monopoly, I'm saying like one or two big players just dominate the whole market. So why I ask this question is, now and US is population, I don't know, 250 or 301 million people. Now, if you look globally, I tell you another monopoly market. For example, the aviation. There's two manufacturers in the world, Boeing and Airbus, right? Basically, they built like, I don't know, 95% of all aircraft planes in the world. Now, what if I told you that in Southeast Asia, in a population of 650 million people, there's only 2 motorcycle manufacturers that control 95% of the entire market. 2. Okay? And one of them, I'm sure you can guess who they are, right? One of them is Honda. The other one is Yamaha. Okay? And Honda alone controls maybe 70%. Yamaha controls another 25%. And all your Suzuki, Kawasaki, BMW, KTM, all these other smaller guys, they only have 5%. All of them only have 5% of the market. So that's where, as we know, when huge monopolies exist across not just a country, but regions, huge inefficiencies arise. And that's why, to answer your first part of the question, that's why the electric mobility transition in our region hasn't happened fast enough, because there is no impetus for the incumbents to change, to move. Another fun fact for you. So Tesla, like us, we're trying to transition the world to electric mobility, right? To cleaner mobility. A lot of people talk about Volkswagen and Toyota, how they make 10 million, 12 million cars a year. And that means 10 to 12 million engines a year, combustion engines. But do you know who is the biggest combustion engine manufacturer in the world, Barry?
Who's that?
Well, another guess for you. Another hint for you is Honda.
Honda, okay.
Right. Honda makes 40 million combustion engines a year. 40 million. From planes, boats, to lawnmowers, to cars, to motorcycles, right?
Right.
So can you see what's happening here? In Southeast Asia, they dominate 70-80% of the market. Throughout the world, they're the number 1 combustion manufacturer in the world. So, and what Tesla has shown is that when you develop an electric vehicle, you basically have to throw out almost 70-80% of the combustion vehicle. All your knowledge, all your experience, all your expertise, all your money, all your supply chain. Your supply chain, you hire millions of people downline, right? Millions and thousands of companies. And all of this has to be changed. So these are the huge frictions that in our industry, in our region, slows everything down. Now, on the technology side, electric technology has been around. Electric vehicle technology has been around a long time, about 100 years ago. But like what, again, Tesla has shown is that to make it an alternative to combustion is extremely difficult, right? It's taken them easily 10 to 15 years now to do that, right? To make it a viable alternative for when a traditional combustion consumer will then consider, electric vehicle. I'm going to compare it with the 10 other combustion vehicles I've owned in the past, I've driven. What would tip me over? Is it subsidies? It can't be just subsidies. It has to be the user experience, right? The vehicle, the technology, the safety, and all these things, right? And we're going up against an industry, like I said, it's easily 100 years old, at least. So these are all the frictions. So what Ion Mobility, what we do, what we learned very early on is that we have to build everything from scratch. So from leaders like Tesla and others, what we learned from their mistakes is that, so they tried to layer on top of combustion as well. They tried to layer their technology on combustion vehicles and then try and reiterate, improve from there. No, that doesn't work. You have to start from scratch. You have to start with a white piece of paper, and then you lose all the lousy compromises of combustion. And then you're able to create a new, truly next generation vehicle.
Yeah, I think I like the way you sort of dissected the industry a little bit there, and you sort of took it apart, because you're right. We definitely have to, because the way Tesla did it is they had to think from the ground up. They had to throw completely everything away, what they knew about cars, and redesign it. And not necessarily the body and what have you, but just the framework at which you run a vehicle manufacturing company. Everything from the way the manufacturing, the engineering, but also the tech behind the car. Because with Tesla, you can have these OTA updates, right? Which
software,
is completely unprecedented in automotive industry, where previously, I remember, you had a car, you had to go to your dealership and then you'll get the update. But here, nowadays, you can just simply roll out an update to your car no matter where it is, as long as it has a cellular connection, you're good to go.
Yes, exactly. That's game changing. The car keeps on improving. it improves as fast as the engineers can update the software.
Yeah. And, I like the way, Ion is focusing on, especially like the motorcycle as well. Do you see, you have the car, which has been been proven out, not with just Tesla, but BMW have done it. GM have done it as well. Because of Tesla, they've sort of propelled that industry. With the motorcycle, though, do you see any technical challenges, or is it really just okay taking the body of a motorcycle and putting a battery in, putting a motor in, and just away you go?
No, so motorcycling and motorcycling engineering, and this is refers to combustion as
Right.
well, is an exercise in miniaturization. Okay. Now, the first combustion engines built were huge, right? I mean, for trains and planes, trains and ships and all that, right? Then it came down to the car. So for us, the biggest challenge was how we're going to miniaturize the electric car technology into a really small format, squeeze it in. How are you going to squeeze batteries, packs? How are you going to squeeze inverters, controllers into a small format? How are you going to squeeze big cables, right? Because electric vehicles need big cables as well. Small little things like that. How are you going to squeeze all the electronics and make sure they don't interfere with each other and disrupt each other? So it's a little bit like what the probably when you go downstream, like what the drone guys are experiencing as well, right? So when I talk to drone manufacturers, they're like, their concerns are totally different, right? They're like, oh, I need to make sure my batteries are as light as possible because I need to take off, right? They don't just need to be small, they need to be light, right? So for electric car guys, more or less, they don't really have to worry about space because they have the whole entire floorboard of the vehicle, the car, with four wheels, right? So you got a lot of space to put where you want to put the batteries. But for bikes, you don't, right? So this exercise in miniaturization is difficult. It really is.
Yeah, I think going through the scaling factor of taking all those components that you just mentioned and trying to, as you said, miniaturize and bring them down to a small scale, it's easier said than done because you have to think about the engineering aspects around the heat, around the dynamics of the car, of the motorcycle as you're maneuvering away from the street, the center of gravity, and all those things. So there's a lot of challenges there, and with that, I wanted to sort of understand where you guys are right now. I know that you started a year ago, but do you have a prototype? Are you working on it? Is it in, what can you sort of tell us about where you are specifically with ion mobility at this point in time?
Sure. So our engineering mantra from the very beginning is basically three words: test, test, and test. Just keep testing. And that means we test in simulation, test in software, and test in real life as well. You just cannot test enough. And this comes from my automotive background as well, right? In BMW, they test, all around the world, hundreds of thousands of kilometers, every single vehicle, every single component. That's why Toyota and all these guys, that's why their cars are so good. That's why they last 1 million kilometers. So for a startup like us, we are, however, limited, right? With resource and budget and all that. But we still try and test as much as possible. So where we're at right now is like this. We have a first prototype out, and we did that really early. We did that within the first 4 to 5 months of setting up the company. We were planning much earlier. So we did a quick, and I won't call it dirty, but we did a quick prototype. And we not only did it up fast, but we started testing it fast. So we sent the bikes into, for example, Jakarta, and we started testing over there to get a lot of feedback and did all the focus groups, feedback with partners, with guys on the street, that sort of thing. And we got a lot of feedback. And that's helping us build going towards our final prototype, which should be next year. But in between the final prototype, you have, like I said, you have to have many iterations in between, right? And each of these iterations, you continue testing. You're even testing the old ones as well, certain components of it. So you end up with a final prototype next year, but having like 10 previous prototypes that you have been continuous testing. So that really makes the final prototype much more robust and ensures that you minimize a lot of risks.
Are you manufacturing the bike in Indonesia or China?
We're manufacturing the bike in Indonesia and Singapore.
Oh, Singapore. Okay.
Exactly. So the plan is, we do like a small batch trial production in Singapore, This is also because of COVID. So this lends back to the fact of
Mm,
COVID.
mm.
Why? Because as leadership, it might not be so easy for us to travel to Indonesia so often, right? Or even stay there for longer periods. So we would then have to refine. We will have to refine our production or assembly in Singapore and do it both sides. Like for example, we do small batch, and for example, we assemble the battery first, and we're confident that in Singapore, then we transfer it to Indonesia. But we don't wait. Then we start assembling other components of the bike here, and then finally do the final assembly. Then we transfer it over. So then that side gives feedback as well. So we run in parallel.
What's
That's yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I like how you have sort of the strategic outlay of manufacturing and operations because you are trying to get this out the door as quickly as possible because you want to test. You want to make sure everything is working as expected. And if it doesn't work, you know why it's not working and fix those issues as quickly as possible so you can, as you said, move to the next iteration, right? And with that, Indonesia is really an interesting market. There's so many, I don't know how many motorcycles are there, but there's a lot. And what was it like in terms of, interfacing with the Indonesian sort of the government and regulatory? Was there a lot of challenges there? How do you access a market like Indonesia?
No, it's extremely. To be honest, we are pretty grateful. They have been extremely supportive so far. And let's be clear, that's not just for us, but they've been pretty supportive of the industry. Because I think Indonesia recognizes that they need to reduce their reliance on fuel imports, right? Um, they understand that electric mobility is the future. They unfortunately are have one of the most polluted cities in the world as well, in Jakarta and some other places. So they understand that if they can clean up the streets in terms of motorcycle emissions, they can do a lot for the health of their people, right? And the industry and economy as well. So and they're not just talking about this. They have introduced a huge slew of measures. For example, EV number plates that allow full use of the vehicle, as opposed to combustion vehicles, where it's odd even days you can use. They've reduced the taxes, registration taxes on electric vehicles, and they've increased the taxes for combustion motorcycles. They're introducing tax benefits for manufacturers to set up shop in Indonesia, right? So this is just starting the beginning ones. And I think for electric cars, they're introducing subsidies for electric chargers as well, which we don't need. So we're extremely grateful for that. But on a ion mobility level, how we navigate this as well is, basically you have to align yourself with like-minded and influential partners. So, for example, our local director over there, he's really interested. They have an electric bus project as well, Indonesia. They're local Indonesians, and they are also influential in the sense that they are the sons of the Minister of Trade of Indonesia, right? So it helps a lot. I mean, there is no, of course, there is no special privileges that we have, but we do have that influence. We have that ear to the ground, feedback from them, so we know where the government is steering towards. So that's really really helpful, and it also means validation for what we're doing and for the company in Indonesia too. So that's really valuable for us.
Is it just Indonesia that you're targeting right now, or are you targeting, like obviously you're in Singapore,
Sure.
how have they been receptive to your idea? What about countries like Vietnam or Thailand? What's the sort of roadmap for those regions?
So we plan to very quickly after launching Indonesia to go to Vietnam and Thailand. So Vietnam is the fourth largest motorcycle market in the world
Yeah.
after India, China, Indonesia, and Vietnam. Right? Thailand is then next. But we want to be focused. We're a startup. We are just maybe 20 people, just 20 plus. Maybe next year we 30 to 40, but we're still small. And Indonesia is a huge market. A city alone in Jakarta, and they have other big cities like Surabaya and in Sumatra as well. So if you just even adopt an Indonesia city launch approach, there are countries in itself, right? Just to give you some perspective, for a company like Vespa, scooter Vespa, Italian brand, their volume in Thailand is bigger than the whole volume in the volume in Vietnam is bigger than the whole volume in Europe, right? So if you just dominate Indonesia or Vietnam, you are bigger than the whole of Europe already in terms of volume. So we are adopting this focused launch approach and capital city approach as well. So maybe Bangkok is more important than Hanoi. So maybe you do Ho Chi Minh and then Bangkok rather than Ho Chi Minh and then Hanoi, stuff like that.
No, I think a focus approach is the way to go. And I can definitely I think there's like a lot of companies out there that just want to dominate the world. I mean, I think world domination is nice to have, and it's sort of like the holy grail you want to achieve. But I think starting small, starting very concentrated and focused on exactly what your target market is. And I think it seems like you guys have done the research. You've entered the market. You're very close geographically to Indonesia, and you probably have people there who understand the situation, boots on the ground, and sort of can give you really high quality feedback about, this is what we need, this is why we need it, this is when we need it, and all those things, right? And I guess, going from there, once you have these geographic markets in place, I want to sort of talk to you about infrastructure, because Tesla have done a really good job with their supercharging network, not just in the US, but they're expanding to Europe, in Australia. They also have a ongoing development there as well. How do you see, the infrastructure around charging, around all of these requirements for electric devices, electric motorcycles, especially in regions that are more or less either developed or developing, right? And what are the challenges there?
So maybe I can bring in personal philosophy of mine to add context. So my personal philosophy over these past few years going to sustainable mobility has been to reduce, reuse, and recycle. This is part of my own life, my own personal life. Basically, reduce consumption, as we can reuse things that we already have. And if you can't, then you go and recycle it, right? Now, when it comes to why I talk about this is because for electric motorcycles, efficiency is key. Let's be clear. The most efficient vehicle known to man, invented by man, is the bicycle. It's the humble bicycle. Of course, there are, of course, risks with motorcycles because you have no protection. But let's be clear. In this world of climate action and where we are heading towards as a civilization, we really have to reduce, reuse, and recycle. Okay. And in terms of mobility, we also have to think about how we can reduce, become more efficient. That's why you see a lot of people cycling much more, and people, like I said, we're pushing into motorcycles because it is the most efficient vehicle. You use the most energy, right? And you get to travel and get to transport longer distances. So this is a thesis against even electric cars, right? And this pivots into electric charging. And this is my point. Electric cars, some of the good electric cars, even Tesla, you're moving 2 tons around. You're moving 2 tons of metal and battery around when you don't really need to. I mean, most of the time, the average journey is 1.5 human beings in the car. Having said that, developed nations need cars, and for safety and that, of course. But in developing nations, they don't need cars that much. You just need a motorcycle. And in terms of charging, that's herein where the problem lies. Because when you have to move 2 tons of metal around, that means the law of the thermodynamics and physics is just that you just need more energy to fill it in, right? That's why you need bigger chargers, bigger, more faster DC superchargers. You're talking about 200 to 500 kilowatt chargers now because people want it fast as well. Not everybody's home can charge it. But this is the clincher for motorcycles or electric motorcycles. You don't need chargers. You don't need fast chargers. Electric motorcycles, because of the efficiency, because of the fact that they have so small batteries, means that any wall plug is a charger. The billions of wall plugs around the world, in every home, in every factory, in every whatever, in every Starbucks or McDonald's, that you can put a waterproof outside, that's your charger. That's your refueling point for the motorcycle. For a car, you can't, because it's going to take 12 hours to do that. And you can't leave your car there for 12 hours in the McDonald's. But for a motorcycle, it take you 20 minutes to an hour. That's it. With slow charging. And you're good to go another maybe 50 kilometers to your next destination. or to your home to recharge. So the point is this. The point is, why reinvent the entire grid infrastructure, electric grid infrastructure, to suit electric vehicles, especially in developing nations? No, you don't need it. Just use what's there already, the infrastructure. For example, our bikes, it's simple. We will have a cable running out, just like a vacuum cleaner. Okay, we have a cable running out, and you find, if you can't roll your bike into your house, which most Indonesian homes can, then you find your office in a factory or whatever, ask your boss to pull a cable for you to charge it. That's it. It's safe because you have onboard charger, you have safety mechanisms to ensure that there's no short circuit and all sort of things. And basically, voila, you have cheap, affordable charging. That is in Indonesia 8 times cheaper than petrol per kilometer, electricity cost on our bike. And then you can charge anywhere. You don't have to go to a petrol station or a car charging station, right? So this is true freedom, we believe, and that's critical.
Does it really take 20 minutes to charge it?
For our bike, sorry.
Yeah, for your bikes. Does it? You said 20 minutes to an hour to charge it. That's really quick.
Yes, because realistically, Barry, you don't charge 0 to 100%. I mean, nobody does that, right? At least on a daily basis, right? You charge maybe a 20, 30%, you have 50%, then you charge to 80, 90, that sort of thing. So in these practical ranges, daily practical ranges, for our bike, you can charge 30 minutes for 30 kilometers, right? And 30 kilometers in any inner city, whether it's Jakarta, Singapore, Bangkok, will get you one way anywhere within the city. So it's good enough if you just need a top up. And yeah.
What I guess that sort of leads on to sort of like the cost topic. I know that especially in countries like Thailand and Vietnam, obviously there's a huge income disparity. We have people who are working different types of jobs, and the standard of living varies between the sort of the social classes, right? So is the goal for Iron Mobility to make EV motorcycles ubiquitous for everyone, or is it just for the elite?
Definitely not for the EV. Definitely not for the EV. We are targeting our motorcycles to, at launch, okay, at launch before scale, to cater to anybody in Southeast Asia who earns $1,000 a month. If you earn $1,000 a month, you could definitely afford our vehicle, our bike. Maybe not 500 US a month, but 800 to 1,000 US, you can definitely afford our bike. Simple. Okay, and that pretty much represents at least in Jakarta about 50 to 60% of the population. In places like Bangkok, more. In Vietnam, a little bit lesser, but it's definitely the mass market. It's not going to be your elites or your rich people. So we're really targeting the lower to the middle income groups of developing nations. And that's significant. So why we're not targeting below? Well, the fact of the matter is we can't. Because without scale, we're unable to bring the cost down of the vehicle to cater to the lower segments. Because like I said, don't forget, the lower segments are served by Honda and Yamaha, who've been building these vehicles for 100 years, close to 100 years. And they're building it by 20 million a year. So the scale that they have, it's, you can't just beat it like within the first year or even within the first few years. We need time for that.
So I guess like if I was in a position and you said, there's only a certain level that you're going to go to before you sort of reach a particular threshold, if I'm working and I'm earning, $500 a month or something like that, and, for the most of, I don't want to obviously put a blanket on all of Southeast Asia, but there's a considerable amount of the population that is in that financial situation. They will have to make a decision. Do I go with this EV vehicle, which will allow me to charge my thing every, 50 kilometers, or should I go with just the standard ICE, combustion motorcycle? Do you care about that? Does it even matter to Iron Mobility? Or because at the end of the day, those guys, Honda, Yamaha, they'll still be there and they'll still be able to cater towards that market. But it seems to me that Iron Mobility is not about the competitive aspect of competing against Honda or Yamaha specifically, it seems to me that you guys are trying to revolutionize an industry specifically, and hopefully cause and sort of instigate a movement for EV motorcycles.
Barry, you hit the nail on the head. You're totally right. So we want to, in a small way as well, inspire and lead the industry and show them it's possible. Look, like I said, I grew up, Honda was my favorite brand, right? I've owned like at least 5 to 6 Honda cars. So what we're trying to do is to inspire them, to show them that the market exists so that they will come in as well to push it, right? We don't believe we can solve the whole problem ourselves. We can't. But we hope we can lead it in the beginning, right? And create a niche for ourselves, but yet inspire these big guys, these big behemoths with huge resources to come in, right? To help the entire industry. Because our mission really is for clean air through better mobility. And we know we can't do it alone.
We have like, especially, I don't know about Singapore. It's been a while since I was there. Are there sort of like, what's the balance between cars and motorcycles in Singapore?
Easily 10 to 1, like 1 million cars and maybe 100,000 motorcycles.
Is there
There.
still like a tax on cars? Like, is there a tax on motorcycles?
Yes.
Oh, wow,
Which
okay.
makes them pretty exorbitant. But having said that, so this is a little bit of nuance, but a lot of, just like in the US where you have Tijuana and San Diego border,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's one of the most major human crossings in the world, right? Tijuana in San Diego, right? So a lot of people don't know this, but between Singapore and Malaysia, in a state of Malaysia called Johor, which is the southern state, is our northern neighbor. It's probably the most, it's probably higher. The human crossings is higher than Tijuana and San Diego. So I think every day, pre-COVID, few 100,000 people cross that. Few 100,000 people, yeah, at least few 100,000 people. And in that few 100,000 people are about 30 to 40,000 motorcycles a day cross into Singapore from Malaysia. So that's where we can see. So we're looking, like I said, we're not just looking at Singapore, we're looking at this region, we're looking at how we can impact even the motorcycles in Malaysia as they come in. If we can convert a significant portion of that, that's basically converting a huge population of motorcycles in Singapore towards electric too.
Yeah, I think I remember going into Malaysia from Singapore, and it's just a whole different world, right? And I think people, you know, they commute back and forth for work, and you see a whole bunch of cars, and the highways are massive. And you're right. I think there's just a lot of people out there who are using the motorcycle for everything. And I remember like going to Vietnam, and you'd see a whole family on a motorcycle. You'd see
Yeah.
people use truckloads, and they like all these crates and pallets stacked on the sort of the back of the motorcycle. And I can definitely see where this technology is going. So, what's next for you guys? What are you hoping to achieve in the next, not say 5 years, but maybe 1 year time by 2021? Where do you guys want to be?
Well, we definitely plan to launch in 2021, launch our vision, which is not only just about the technology, mind you. So we are bringing about, we're trying to introduce pretty innovative distribution concepts, financing, subscription concepts as well, that really in this exact form hasn't been seen, at least in this region. Maybe in the West, maybe US, it's been tried and tested. Like for example, direct to consumer models that Tesla has shown, subscription models which Tesla doesn't really have. They have leasing and all that, but we believe could be extremely suitable for our region. So, like for example, like what you just said about the affordable segment, right? Is Ion Mobility going to in the next few years neglect or disregard the affordable segment, the low end segment? No. So the plan is with subscription. We believe that because the vehicle keeps on improving, our first adopters will upgrade soon. And what's happening with subscription is that then they'll return the vehicles to us, and those vehicles we will churn, like I said, reduce, reuse, recycle. We will churn those vehicles, refurbish them, and then push it out as subscription to the 500 to 600 US income guys, you see, so that they can get in quickly into the electric mobility space as well, right? So we're thinking, so with traditional auto financing and car sale, motorcycles, bike sale, it's very difficult to do that. But we are considering, we have some models that we're going to launch next year as well, which we think can change the entire game on how vehicle motorcycle distribution is done in our part of the world.
So, I mean, that's a really like grand vision. And for like consumers like me, who, you know, I'd be interested in purchasing one myself, but how do you, I don't think, are you guys actually by 2021 hoping to get an electric motorcycle to actually people like you and myself, or is it really just launching, you know, launching that product, but still very high in the testing phase? What's your plan for getting it into the hands of the customers by 2021?
That's a that's a that's a very tricky question,
Yeah.
but a very good question, which we get a lot. So right now we only know what we know, what we can see as far as we can. In terms of the development, we're on track to get the vehicle into hands of customers, at least the first batch of early adopters, the guys who pre-order, right, by the end of the year next year. But with COVID, so this is a big but, right? We don't know how long and how bad COVID is going to remain in Indonesia, and how that will affect our manufacturing, assembly, and launch, right? So it's still open in the air in that sense, but we are still on target in terms of our own internal targets to get the first bikes into customer hands by the end of next year.
Wow. Okay, that's really cool. Do you, what's the website called? It's like ionmobility.asia.
That's right.
Okay, I'll put it in
Yes.
the in the show notes
Thank
after
you.
this. But it sounds, you know, it sounds really cool. But at the same time, you know, I want to sort of like understand a little bit about your journey as well, because I know you mentioned a lot about your interest in motorcycles. You started Scorpio as well, and then you had like a growing the BMW dealership as well. Were you always interested in sort of motorcycles and sort of mobility, or were you just doing other things before this?
No, I've been a automotive guy, pretty much most of my working life. Like I said, I dreamt of being a race car driver. That's all I want to do, you know. And I'm one lucky few who made their hobby into like a job, into a career. And I'm thankful and grateful that it served me well, and I learned a lot, right? But then, I soon, like I said, I soon realized that how important mobility is, but how it has to change for the future. Let's be clear, there will still be race cars and combustion vehicles into the future, but maybe they won't be used by everybody. You have autonomous cars, you use them in racetracks, for leisure and all that. Just kind of like how we ride horses for fun nowadays, for fun and for sport, right? We don't use horses as the main mode of transport today. And a little bit of my background as well. So one of the key things that happened to me was when I was based in Beijing, about 6 years ago. And if I can share an anecdote, when I was over there, and this was in the middle of the whole Dieselgate scandal, and a report came out in Beijing that said that the average Beijing resident breathes in a brick of PM 2.5, okay?
Wow.
Every year into their lungs. So for some of your listeners, you don't know what PM 2.5 is. Basically particulate matter. 2.5 means the size of particulate matter. And why the size is important is because at this size level, it goes into your blood. If it's any smaller, okay, it gets dissipated. If it's any bigger, it gets trapped by your lungs. But at this size, it goes into your bloodstream, and you get all sorts of nasty heart diseases and all sorts of bad diseases, right? So can you imagine a Beijing resident breathes in a brick every year into their lungs, just by walking on the street? So, like I said, it gave me awakening that, hey, I need to do my part, right? I need to do my part to see how I can improve this. China has done their part. They have moved into renewable energy, into EVs big time. They've thrown billions of dollars at the problem, just like California, for example, and US in some ways being a leadership. But coming back to Southeast Asia, I looked at around me and I said, what can I do, right? With with my experience and all that. And then I started as well doing some of my personal pursuits. So I became a climate change witness. I call myself a climate change witness. So I'm not a proponent or advocate or scientist. I'm not any of those things. But I just try and verify what these scientists are saying, what the scientists are saying, what a lot of these advocates and proponents are saying. So for example, the last 2 years before COVID, I climbed 5 mountains around the world. I went to Iceland. I went on a climate change expedition. I conducted with some guide friends. We went into the ice. We looked at the carbon dioxide that's over the last 500, 800 years and how it's accumulated in the atmosphere. And this is all has to do with climate change, with greenhouse gases, right? Which is the longest term problem, but the short term problem is the bad air, right? That's affecting human health. So then, this built up my education, right? Such that I knew how and motivated me to realize how this is so important, right? What we're doing, especially for Southeast Asia, that I have to make an impact. I have to at least try to do this, for our region and our people.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people who probably are listening to this as well, and I think people in general, they need to find something that they're passionate about, but also something that's bigger than themselves. And it seems to me that you and everyone at Ion have definitely found a calling, and the calling is to obviously move the world to more a sustainable future through ion mobility. And I think, I want to touch back to something that you said before about finding what you do and finding love in what you do as well. How important is that to you? I think a lot of people nowadays don't fathom on their side. They're sort of living through and working through a career they don't really enjoy and all that stuff, right? But how did you sort of get out of that rut, if you per se, and sort of find, what you actually wanted to do?
Well, I think it starts with a lot of self-reflection and humility as well. I think it starts from there. Um, by asking yourself, right, what really matters to you, and being humble is also being honest, right, with yourself. Like we have all these um, goals or objectives that whether our family or society or our peers put on us, like, oh, we want to earn more money, you're going to get a position, you want to be a leader, these things. But at the base level, we have to come to terms with ourselves. Like, what do we really want? What really matters to us at the end of the day. And I always take an approach where I fast forward. I've always fast forward, and I look at myself, I fast forward myself, and I look back at that point and say, what if 10 years from now, if I look back, am I doing what I think I should be doing right now, right? Whether is there anything I should pivot or I should change or improve? And it's difficult. Life is difficult, right? And startups' life is difficult. Everybody's job is difficult, especially through these pandemic times. But if you understand your why, then everything becomes much easier, right? The problems that we face, money issues or the pride issues or all the obstacles put in, it just makes it a little bit easier. It's not going to make things go away, but when we face it, like for example in ion mobility, we face huge challenges as well, right? We get doors shut on us all the time, but because we have that fallback to say that we're doing something bigger than ourselves, it matters. And this is not just here to make money, right? We're here for good too, right? Write better. One of our mottos is write better, write for good. So I think that's a lot more powerful than just having a singular goal, and that is not authentic as well to yourself. So that's basically my message.
Yeah, I think, when you mentioned about how to sort of like you can be profitable but also doing good at the same time, right? And I think there's sort of this like stigma where if you now in society, I suppose, where if you want to do good, you have to be non-profit, and that's not necessarily true. I think there's a lot of evidence to show that if you want to make change in the world, you can be a for-profit company. You can make revenue, and you can do really well as a revenue-generating business. But at the same time, in parallel, try to make the world a better place, right? Which is what you guys are trying to do. And I think you found that sort of niche that a lot of people are striving to sort of find themselves, not necessarily in EV, but their own personal sort of Venn diagram of, I want to do good. At the same time, I also want to make money, right? And I think that's a big challenge for a lot of people in their day-to-day lives, and especially when it comes to a startup and sort of facing the hurdles of being rejected, having, as you mentioned, all those doors shut. What sort of advice do you give people who want to do their own thing? What is sort of the few tips you can offer to people who want to say, "Hey, Joel, I'm really interested in like this, but I'm scared. I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if this is going to succeed or fail." What would you say to those guys?
I would say there really is only one way, in my mind, and that is to surround yourself with people who are aligned, who are like-minded. When I say like-minded, doesn't mean that they agree with you in your vision, but like-minded in your values and principles. Right? So values and principles are really important to me, um, and this is part of knowing why and who you are. Right? Being authentic to yourself. Then you set your values and surround yourself with people with the same value set. And it can be in insurance, it can be in cars, it can be in electric vehicles, it can be in a lot of other things. Um, sorry, I had a call in. But surround yourself with, it can be your family and friends too. But reach out to them. Reach out to the like-minded people in your life who share your values and principles. Reach out to new people, right? Whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's in your network and social security, don't be shy. You got to reach out to them and start surrounding yourself so that to build up your network of strength. And it doesn't matter whether you're in Indonesia, Singapore, in US, in Africa, or whatever, or China. It doesn't matter because we are stronger together, you know. And when you have people that are aligned with you, who align with your value set, then they will help you. You will start to help them, and they will help you, and you'll start to support each other. And suddenly, solutions will present themselves. Now, whether you talk about capital raising, whether you get an in to a VC who's also aligned with your maybe your sustainable side or whatever they're interested in, whether it's healthcare or whatever, you will get networks into talent co-founders, right? Who are just like you, which you need. No man is an island, and you'll be aligned with partners and customers as well, future customers who believe in what you're doing, and that's the only way you're going to get strong. And that's the only way you're going to get your vision off the ground. And that's the only way you're going to tweak your vision as well. Because nobody, I don't care who you are, even Jeff Bezos, he didn't from day one envision Amazon to what it is today. It's because he's surrounded with people who loved and care about, who shared his value set, who are willing to work hard together with him and iterate and move and just evolve into what it is today. And that goes for Elon Musk as well, I believe. So this is my advice. We don't let yourself get beat down, right? When doors get closed on you, there's always going to be another opener, right? If you send out 100 LinkedIn invitations and you only get 10 or 1, it's fine. Talk to that one person in a genuine, authentic way. If that person isn't aligned with you, then might move on, keep moving, keep pushing on, and build up your network. So that's really my
Yeah, no,
advice.
just to sort of add on top of that and sort of close the conversation a little bit here, is that there's this whole concept of reaching out, right? And I think you can't do this yourself. You can, I don't know, I don't care how smart you are, you can't do this yourself, and you need people around you. And this is why it's so important, but so easy nowadays. Like, we have everything around us. We have Twitter and
Yeah,
LinkedIn and Facebook. Like, there's no excuse to not develop your network. And really, it really comes down to how driven are you to really grow your network, to grow the people, the like-minded people around you. Because at the end of the day, those are the people who are going to push you forward, and vice versa. You're going to push them, and you got to sort of offer them something of value, and they'll do the same for you as well. And you sort of hit the nail on the head there with being authentic, right? Don't send one of these spam emails or whatever it may be. Just get to know them, and just have a chat, like you and I are doing right here, because I didn't know you before this conversation at all, but I'm getting to know more and more about you as we start to sort of wrap the sort of the proverbial onion, right? And I think this is a really good point where a lot of people who are sort of just getting out of college or sort of wanting to do something for themselves and not work for the man anymore, but really focus on developing something for themselves, developing something that's impactful. I think that is something that I think people can really prescribe to, exactly what you just said. So, with that, I think, for the most part, everything that we just spoke about has been really valuable, not just to learn about iron mobility, but also your journey as well, and your passions and everything behind it as well. Do you want to, just to close off with some iron mobility stuff, do you want to tell people about how they can reach you or reach the company?
Yeah. Thank you, Barry. The last closing note about this network, that I want to,
Mm-hmm.
last small little advice I want to share. When you do reach out to these people, remember this. This is my own philosophy as well. When you interact with with like-minded people, try to listen like we are wrong, but of course debate like we're right. Right. That's um, that's my last message for that.
That's
Um,
very nicely put.
yeah. Um, for ion mobility, you know, we what we're trying to do is really to kickstart a movement, right, towards sustainable mobility, and we're seeking out partners, talent. When I say partners, it's not just investors, great engineers, great business people, even great customers, future customers who believe in our vision, who believe that we need to accelerate the transition towards sustainable mobility, but that cars are not just the only cars, buses, and trucks. They are not the only solution. For the 3 or 4 billion in the developing world, it has also to be the humble motorcycle. Right. So I would appeal to any of your listeners or anybody out there who's listening to this who resonate with this message to also reach out to us and think about how they would like to contribute to. And maybe it's not contributing to iron mobility, but it's like what we could help you to, like to kickstart you. Maybe you're in Africa and how you're wondering, hey, how do I start sustainable mobility in Africa? We would love to, within reasonable resource and time, give you some tips as well, how to start your company and your project, right? How to manage the supply chains and start a company and startup as well. These sort of things. What we're trying to do at Ion Mobility is really to change the mobility lives of starting with 650 million people in Southeast Asia, improving the air quality so that people can live better lives, can have lower health costs from bad air, right? Just recently, 2 years ago, for example, in Bangkok, the air was so bad over a week, they just shut down all the schools. Okay, that means, I don't know, a few 100,000 school kids just couldn't learn for a week or two. That's sad. That's really sad. And why? Why is this? It's not like there was a pandemic that nobody could stop, right? It's because we just had too many polluted vehicles in the city, right? Just doesn't make sense, right? So we would like to reach out to all like-minded people in our space as well, who would like to join us. We don't think we have all the answers. We really don't. We don't think we have all the technology. We don't think we have the smartest people as around. But we think we have a good team, a good motivated team that that can make a difference. So in sustainable mobility. So we would really like anybody out there who agrees with us to reach out to.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Joel. And everything, as Joel mentioned, I'll put everything in the show notes, and hopefully, your website and all the blog posts that you've put up as well. They can have a read through it. But I really want to thank you, obviously, for coming and spending the time to talk about what you're doing, but also talk about a little bit about yourself as well. So thank you, Joel.
Kudos, Barry. Thanks for being a great host, and like I said, wish you very best on your endeavor.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joel.